when I ask a guy to tell me his recovery goals, and he says, to quit meth. Okay, but then what? Right? Who are you as a person? Clear gives this example of someone who's... The Aftermath podcast is an outreach tool to help men who have sex with men break free from the addictive patterns associated with chemsex, otherwise known as crystal meth or Tina. I'm your host, Dr. Dallas Bragg, a former crystal meth user, now recovery coach. Here you will find a repository of tools and resources intended to eradicate the epidemic that is plaguing our MSM population. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are not to be taken as medical advice. Also, we will be talking about drugs and sex, so if you feel triggered to use, stop listening and contact your local emergency system and or your support network. Let's go. Hey y'all, welcome to the Aftermath Podcast, Season 2, Episode 1. I am so grateful that you are here. I'm so grateful you're taking the time to listen to this podcast. So grateful for your ongoing support. If you are trying to quit crystal meth, or you know a gay or bi man who is, this podcast will give you my insights from 7 years, almost, of recovery from crystal meth. Listen, I am extremely grateful for you listeners. The podcast has grown every single month that we've had it, and now I'm excited to see what happens in Season 2. But let me tell you, though, the break was nice. I will admit, this podcast takes a lot more time than what you might realize to put on. Also, it costs some money. So if you love the Aftermath podcast, please help get more people downloading the episodes so we can get a sponsor. Share on your social media, please, on your Facebook groups, your recovery network, wherever you think anyone might be interested in hearing the podcast. I would appreciate if you enjoy it, or even if you don't enjoy it, but you think somebody else would, share it on your social media. All right, so to get this season fired off, I'm going to give you another solo pod the way I ended Season 1. This time, I'm talking about how I would quit meth all over again, 90 days and 7 steps worth of my advice, right? I get asked so often, how did I quit using meth? And I thought, knowing what I know now, what if I did have to start over? What would I do in the first 90 days? So, who this advice is not for would be a severely addicted daily user who's completely engrossed in methamphetamine use disorder. If you can't keep a job or function in your life, this is going to be a little bit over the horizon for you. These suggestions would benefit you down the road, some perhaps after treatment, right? So keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that this is not medical advice. I have a doctorate degree, but I am not a medical doctor or a psychiatrist. So these aren't in any particular order. However, let me know also. However, I did leave the most important for last. Number 7 isn't only what I would do if I had to do it over, but what I did do. And to me, number 7 is the most valuable and honestly could be utilized for almost any stage of meth recovery. So I take that back. If you are in severe methamphetamine use disorder, number 7 is definitely one you could start implementing today. So here is my meth-free blueprint. 7 key practices for the first 90 days. What I would do if I had to start it all over again. Number 1, attend 90 12-step meetings in 90 days. Yes, you heard that right. I don't think there is a better way, honestly, to interrupt your daily pattern and set a foundation for transitioning from one life to another than committing to consistent daily action. You've probably heard me say that, but instead of setting hard to reach goals like I'll meditate every day or I'll journal once per day, the meetings are already there. The meetings are already set up and they're waiting for you to just show up. They're offered 24/7 in person or online. And if you are still in the meth closet, You can attend an online meeting with your camera off. You literally have no fucking excuse here. Hear me out on this. The importance of going to these meetings is not necessarily the content of the meetings. And I have guys say, yeah, but I don't want to do the 12 steps and I don't want to say the serenity prayer. I don't want to have a higher power. You don't have to drink the Kool-Aid. Let's think broader here. It's the consciousness of making a commitment and keeping it. This is very important in the early days. This is shocking your subconscious with a complete 180 of what you were doing when you were using meth. So for instance, for me, my life toward the end of my active use looked like this. In the morning, whether that meant waking up from a pass the fuck out deep Tina sleep, which at wake up would be a big inhale and a confusion of where I was for about 15 minutes. Or if it meant taking a shower after being up all night, right? The morning starts, I would begin planning how I was going to raise enough money that day to buy drugs. And if I could raise enough to buy food, I would eat something too. I would buy the drugs to have the energy to work on my latest screwball scheme to get money to catch up my rent and pay my utilities. Now, at the very end, as y'all have heard, if you've heard my story, I was meandering around the airport area, living under a tree with a bag of stolen merchandise. I was afraid to open Grindr because I was afraid that they, whoever they were, would be able to locate me through the Grindr gaydar, right? That's the existence I had. I was injecting about 3 times a day. Now, how do you segue from that kind of existence in life into a life of recovery? Some people go to drug treatment, and that assists with the bridge, right? But for me, again, if I were to start over today, I would commit to a 12-step meeting every day for 90 days to bridge that gap, right? It would be a way to meet new people who are in recovery, establish some structure to a very chaotic life, set new routines, and show myself that I can follow through. I can do something. I can make it. I can show up to something, right? And show myself that, because there's an element of self-trust that has to be rebuilt. And the meetings are already there for you. Takes very little effort. Now, me personally, if I went back to do it again, I would not attend CMA or NA. I did, but I was court ordered. I personally, when I was allowed to, felt so much more comfortable and less judged in a primarily straight AA meeting. That's my experience, right? My nervous system, though, was at its most regulated, and I built relationships that felt the most safe with straight men and women in my AA meetings. In my own recovery journey, I did find a wonderful group of people through an ayahuasca and psilocybin retreat that became my own version of a 12-step tribe. But for this podcast, I want to make this as practical for you as possible. Not everybody can go to an ayahuasca retreat, right? And I want to underscore the point that finding a new tribe and establishing a new routine is imperative. It's just the path of least resistance, the easiest thing to do. And if I were to have it to do over, I would attend the meetings one day, every day for 90 days. Number 2, I would find at least one person to be completely transparent with about my use, and I would enlist them to be my accountability partner and provide a space of non-judgment. This is important, an important part of what I needed. And I would choose a straight woman, to be quite honest. Not everybody has this luxury. I get it. But I have found that my straight women friends, no offense to you, straight women friends, are the most nosy, intrusive, and hard-ass about helping me keep my commitments and keeping me out of trouble. And they don't waver. You're asking a gay man to stop you from going out to hook up. Could be on a volatile ground, okay? In my experience, my girlfriends have the most genuine interest too in my well-being, and they will go the extra mile to ensure that I stay away from meth once they understand. And they can sleep in my bed with me if that's what it takes, and there's no danger or opportunity for sex to happen because any sex at all would trigger me in the beginning of my recovery. And I would give said girlfriend a job description. I would share with her the gritty and gory details of what and how gay men behave on crystal meth, and make sure she knew that just because I say I'm going to sleep at 10 p.m., that doesn't mean I won't wake up at 2 with a boner and jump on Grindr and be smoking in a pipe within 30 minutes. They need to know the specifics and the nuances of how this works. Once they have the information, then they're more apt and more likely to help you. But that depends on you being as descriptive as possible. Okay? All right. I would give her specific guidelines. Again, like check my location at this hour, call me this many times per day, etc. And it might sound like a lot, right? It might sound like a lot to ask somebody else. But I have found in my experience that these types of friends are more than happy to offer this kind of support. And honestly, again, it's only temporary. This is a temporary way of being. She's not going to check up on you for the rest of your life. She's not going to have to get up at 3 a.m. for the rest of her life. She doesn't have to monitor you forever. We are talking about 90 days here, guys. I mean, get over the fucking whining about the state of your life in the beginning of recovery right now, that you have no privacy. You have to be monitored. There's no fun anymore. This is the nature of the substance and the gay culture that promotes it. Okay? With the apps. This is not alcohol. This is not cocaine. You're trying to quit. It takes extreme measures. And again, it is only temporary. If you don't have a person like that in your life, swallow your pride. Ask your mom, your sister, your auntie, whatever. Someone who you are scared shitless to admit your problem to. Bringing this out into the light will be the scariest, but the most liberating decision you can make. And it will feel so much better after you're doing it. But often I hear guys say, well, I really just can't tell my family. You don't understand the culture, blah, blah, blah. But really deep down, you just don't want to tell them because you know it's going to make it a whole hell of a lot harder to use once they know. Because in your heart, you just aren't ready to let it go. So I want you to really ask yourself and begin to be honest with yourself about your motivations and intentions. All right, number 3, I would act as if I was in the witness protection program. I would change my identity completely. And in a way you are, right? But literally this time, you are escaping the grips of an insidious substance, an insidious set of sex zombies who are always on the prowl for you, right? There is someone partying in your town right now, no matter where you are. I promise, anytime and anywhere. Look, if I can be sequestered to a trailer out in a cow field in the backwoods of West Virginia, and be able to find a guy to shoot up meth with the very same day I'm put there due to my trusty friend Grindr, meth is everywhere. Now, I had to drive 50 miles, but I got it, okay? When there's a will, there's a way. There are guys doing it 24/7, always on the hunt. The Grindr and Sniffies grid stay hot. They stay hot with our pointer fingers scrolling and trolling, right? For the perfect P&P partner, H&H partner, wherever you are in the world, you call it something different, but you know what I'm talking about. You want to disappear. You want to disappear in the witness protection program, and you don't want to leave a trace because they will sniff you out. Listen, for me in the beginning, if I left any room for choice between meth and literally anything else, including spending time with my own children, meth would always win. So if I had the opportunity to have Grindr on my phone, if it was there, and it was, my body would literally shake. My body would quiver. I would be jonesing for that stupid trill of the new message on Grindr, right? The FOMO is real. Just knowing that with one click of Grindr, the whole world of chemsex would open up for me. That was literally too much for me to bear at this time. This is why if I had it to do over, I would block access to it. I know you're a grown man. Who gives a shit? Listen, if you go to rehab, they're going to take your phone away. Why do you think that is? So if you are going to try to do this on your own, you are going to have to treat yourself as a child. Or in this case, as if you just testified against the most dangerous mob boss out there. I would change my complete number. And that is one thing I did do. I changed my number. Listen, your phone number is oddly a part of your identity. Letting go of it is figuratively and literally wiping out who you once were and starting over. This whole excuse I hear about, but what if so-and-so needs to reach me? Well, if that person is important enough to you and you to them, they will find you. We're not in this era of great privacy these days, okay? Be smart about this. Notify your friends and family before you change your number. If you're using an iPhone or if you're using WhatsApp, I don't know about Android, sorry, but you can access blocked numbers, right? So saying you'll just block user buddies and dealers is not enough. And you know that. You know that. I knew that. So if I had it to do over, I would change my number and I would deactivate all my social media. I would install blocks on my phone so I cannot access apps like Grindr and sites like Sniffies or Ritmin or Bareback, whatever, BBRT or any of the rest of them, right? This also might mean taking a new route to work, changing every single part of your normal routine down to getting out of bed on a different side. This begins the momentum of you creating a new identity, someone who doesn't use meth, and most importantly, is committed to being the best and highest version of yourself. This means everything you knew about you must die, period. Number 4. I would ignore everything I know and everything I was told in treatment and in 12 steps and everywhere else that I heard about relapse. I would embody the belief. This took me too long to get there. I wish I had it in the beginning. Embody the belief that if I use again, it is part of the process, is a point on the journey. And when and if I do, I will learn everything I can from it. I will take notice and be the observer of my emotions, my thoughts, my behaviors. I would study myself. I would stay committed to recovery and anchor into the winds of how many days total I did stay abstinent, not how many days since my last use. Okay, this isn't tracking the loss prevention, tracking the how many mistake. What is it? How many accidents have you had on the floor? You know, I used to do that at Sam's Club. It's been 5 days since our last accident, right? To be quite honest, I wouldn't even share, if I had it to do over, I wouldn't even share my use with my straight AA 12-step group because I don't think they would quite understand, and they didn't, what the philosophy is. And right now in my journey, if I had to do over, I am only paying attention to and giving weight to the positives, the wins, the North Star goal of being my best self. How in the use experience or relapse was I my best self? How can I respond to it as my best self? That is my goal. And the people at the 12-step meeting, or the people in my family, the people who don't know what the fuck it's like to use meth and to try to stop using meth, understand. My best and highest person doesn't succumb to dwelling on guilt and shame either, based on somebody else's opinions or experiences. And I know, this is me, if I had to do it over again, that the more I notice the wins, the more I win. The more I notice the losses, the more I lose. I would never say to myself either, I'm never using Tina again, which I did, because that is an unrealistic expectation, and I'm not setting myself up for disappointment. I'm living in complete and total honesty. And the honest truth for me early in my recovery was that, you know what? I might use again. In fact, I really want to use again. And admitting that to myself builds self-trust and a space of honesty and transparency, and oddly enough, that it keeps me from using. They weren't going to let me out of drug treatment because I had this know-it-all, fucking cocky, I'm different than everybody attitude. And it was near the end, and I was with my counselor, and I don't know what got into me, but I finally was honest. And I said, I'm scared to not be here. I want to use, and I think I could likely use if I don't have the confines of this treatment. And he looked at me and he said, finally, you're being truthful. You're being honest. That is going to what keeps you abstinent. Well, he said clean, but you know how I feel about the word clean. That is what set me free, admitting it. So I would know that saying I'm not using meth or don't use meth only makes me want to use. It's like saying don't think of a red balloon. That's all you can think about, right? So I would change my daily mantra from don't use meth to I'm my best and highest version of Dallas today. And that automatically strikes out using meth. But not only that, it also opens up the capacity to be so much more than just a person who doesn't use. I increase my capacity to love, to heal, to grow, for empathy, to experience the world differently. I would have no time for people who gasp and act stupid when you mention the word relapse and think that you've failed and look at you sideways. I would have no time for people who guilted me if I missed the meeting or shamed me in any way at all. I would pick and choose, and this part I did, my circle very carefully and very wisely. And I would judge it by how I feel right here in my belly. If all else fails, I would ask myself, what would someone who is meth-free do? Every day, all day, I would ask myself, what would someone who is meth-free do? And that would begin reprogramming my subconscious and creating this new man, this new way of showing up in the world. Number 5, I would masturbate twice a day or more. So many of my clients and other guys who reach out to me are searching for the answer to why they relapse or why a craving took them over or why they keep using. And when my clients call me to say, I'm having the strongest craving, my first question is always, you know how when you contact IT and they're always like, have you powered it on and off? That's kind of how I feel when I'm like, have you jacked off? My first response is, have you jerked off or have you wanked, depending on where my client is in the world. I mean, come on. There is no better way to get rid of a Tina craving than post-nut clarity. I have one client who made up the phrase nut and block, right? To when he would receive those, those random texts from the unknown numbers, because he doesn't change his number, but the ones of like, hey, what's up? Knowing full well what it is that they want, right? He nuts and blocks. He comes and blocks them. Is that the long-term answer? No. Are we talking about the first 90 days in this podcast? Yes. So I would come as soon as I woke up, and if I had to, during lunch, and then at night again. In the beginning, this can be the most effective way to keep yourself from succumbing to the desperation and the sometimes uncontrollable drive of your libido. Your brain associates sex with meth. This is not news, right? So when you are horny, you are triggered to use meth. Over time, the work is going to be sexual reintegration, hopefully with a therapist. But that ain't happening in the first 90 days, right? Some people suggest a detox from porn and masturbation in the first 90 days to reset the brain. And that's great. But I personally, and again, I'm not a clinician, but I personally disagree. Your body has been in full sex mode for a very long time. You can't just cut that off all at once because the pressure of the sexual energy is going to build up so strong and you are not equipped to handle that, and it's going to explode. And we as gay men need something to quench this insatiable desire to fuck. So I would keep my coffers empty if I had to do it all over again. So much more than I did, because if you do keep access to Grindr and you keep access to social media, if that's what you want to do, you're going to get horned up and you're going to start scrolling and you're going to start looking at images on Instagram that get you on Grindr, and then you're going to start having conversations and flirt with the idea of hooking up or flirt with the idea of using. And if you happen to be strong enough, you'll end up jerking off to stop the cycle, and then you can go to sleep. So why not just be preemptive, get a few extra hours of sleep by going ahead and coming? Listen, do it twice if you need to. Three sometimes for me, depending on the day. And in the name of harm reduction, sometimes you have to think about Tina scenarios to get off, or watch party porn to get off. This is natural, okay? It is like breaking up with a toxic ex. At first, you may still have to think about him to get off, or even think about him to get off with a new guy, right? This isn't bad. It's just the way your brain is wired right now. And it isn't forever. Don't catastrophize this. Oh no, I had to think about Tina to come. There's no hope for me. It's been 30 fucking days. Give yourself a break here. Even if it's been a year, listen, there's work to be done, but it isn't forever. Would you rather get off watching an old video of you high and fucking, or would you rather go out and make a new one? Sometimes you have to choose the lesser of two evils. Whatever it takes to change the pattern, even if it is a 1% change, better is better. Number 6, I would systemize my life. Now, this somehow, part of this is true. I did systemize my life out of necessity, though. But listen, willpower is pretty much bullshit. So for me, I have a whole ton of willpower at 5 a.m. to about noon. After that, all bets are off for me, right? I'm like a feral cat. I'm here, I'm there. I just lose all of my scruples. So I rely on systems to push me through the day to reach my goals. And if you've read the book Atomic Habits, if you haven't, I recommend you do, because it is probably the most powerful recovery book out there, and it isn't even a recovery book. But James Clear talks about not focusing on the goal, but the underlying systems that allow you to reach your ultimate lifestyle. Same thing with the recovery. When I ask a guy to tell me his recovery goals, and he says, to quit meth. Okay, but then what? Right? Who are you as a person? Clear gives this example of someone who's being offered a cigarette, right? And they're trying to stop smoking. The response, no, I'm trying to quit, says that they're defeated in a battle. They infer that they are still smoking. They haven't stopped. But the response of, I don't smoke, I'm not a person who smokes, that infers that their entire identity has shifted. Same thing here. That is your goal, your entire identity shifting. Like I said, everything about you must die. Whatever your life was set up as before, and whatever you accepted as your personality must die and rise again as the man who is living his fullest potential. So in this new way of being, we set up systems in our life to support our vision so we don't fall. It's like an infrastructure. It's like scaffolding. In the beginning, when you quit crystal meth, every single day of your life is a system, a plan, a deliberate preemptive strike on old programmings and old patterns. You want to set up your life so that there is absolutely no way you could even use meth if you wanted to. This requires, yes, giving up your privacy, giving up your fun, giving many things up that you were used to. Maybe it is alcohol, going out to gay events, having evenings alone. In the name of investing in a future where you can enjoy these things as your new potentialized self. You can enjoy these things and not end up in some dingy hotel or with an escort or an orgy and paying the price for the next 2 weeks because you got high on meth, lying to your friends, your family, your coworkers, yourself, spiraling emotionally. Where you are now is that first vodka drink with your friends at the club costs you the next 2 to 3 weeks of your sanity, relationships, your career, and self-respect. That's where you are now. So consider that and consider what it takes to build a new system. And so what I mean by this, asking yourself, here's an example. When is my most detrimental danger zone? Is it the weekend? Okay. Then beginning on Thursday night, because in my experience, if you are a weekend warrior, your body will physiologically begin preparing for the meth blast on Thursday nights. You will notice a lack of sleep, irritability, an insatiable need, right, to use or get on Grindr. You won't be able to keep your mind off or your finger off your phone. So you make a plan, a system for the weekend to set your life up in a way that blocks Tina off completely. This may look like having that straight girlfriend stay in your bed, not on your couch, because your ass will sneak out the window. And maybe she stays for a couple nights, maybe it's the whole weekend. Asking mom and dad if you can stay there. Filling up your weekend with plans that you cannot easily cancel. Early morning coffee with a friend on Saturday to keep your ass at home on Friday, etc. Use your imagination. You want to have every single hour of that weekend accounted for. You want to handcuff yourself at this stage. The point of this is interrupting the pattern. Experiencing several weekends in a row without using. Experiencing what your life could be like as a, quote, normie. What it's like to reinvest in relationships. Go and get some culture in you. Go to an art museum or something. See what potential there is without the weekend being a porn-infested, dick-chafed cesspool of regret. Systems. Having family and friends check in on you at certain times throughout the weekend. Here's the thing. If you are not out of the meth closet yet, that's okay too. You don't have to tell your friends and family why they are checking in on you. Or you can make some type of vague reason, right? Arrange to call your grandma Saturday morning at 7 a.m. You don't have to say, well, Mama, I need to schedule a call so I won't fuck 5 guys Friday night. There are ways to set up these systems that work for you. Look, I know you are resourceful, and I know how your mind thinks. You are the king of loopholes, and it gets you off to outsmart everyone and secretly use meth. It gets you off to think that you have put the wool over everyone's eyes, that you're sneaking around in the dead of night, going to some dingy apartment. Look, use that same resourcefulness to set up your weekend so that no one could figure out that. Use your resourcefulness to set up your weekend so that no one could figure out how to use meth. That's what I'm trying to say. This is like when they bring in someone who has embezzled a lot of money to help catch fraudulent activity, right? It's the same thing. You know how the perpetrator thinks. So make the system impenetrable. Ask yourself, okay, without Grindr on my phone, without this accessibility, this is my situation. So how would I, if I'm in this situation, take myself there, how would I get meth? Then let that sneaky mind of yours expose your plans. And then put all the roadblocks in place that you can. Lastly, number 7, I would spend every chance, and this is the one that I think, again, this is the most important, most impactful. I would spend every chance I get visualizing my life as the best and highest version of me. And this is something I did, right? In the beginning, I was homeless. I was in drug treatment court. I was in rehab. I was on probation. I had 4 felony drug possession charges hanging over my head. And I was working as a server at a gross-ass taco place. This was right before I went into sex work too. I used my tips to rent an extended stay room at the most horrible place you could imagine. The door to this room didn't even shut all the way, right? But like I would shut it and there was a gap so much that you could see in my room while you're passing. So anyway, I would get on the public bus at 6 a.m. and I'd begin my ride into downtown because I would have to go to the courthouse, pee in a cup. Then I would have to ride back across town to treatment. And then I'd have to ride back across town to the taco place until 2 a.m. Here I was at 42 years old, living this existence. Every day I would have to walk past the law school where I was once employed as the marketing executive. Now homeless and penniless, the clothes on my back was from the Christian Mission free clothing store. The Christian Mission that was one of the 5 organizations I studied for my doctorate degree. I had to go back to as a client. Now, I could easily have been depressed, embarrassed, hopeless, shamed. I could have dwelled on what I had done to my life and the lives of my children. It could have been crushing. I could have felt remorse over how I treated my mother. I could have given up, and I could have just went back to the streets. I could have felt overwhelmed by the amount of time and effort in front of me that it looked like it could, to build my life back, if it was even possible to build anything back. But instead, I closed my eyes on that bus in between every destination. And at night before I passed out from exhaustion, and I closed my eyes and I lived in my future. I remembered my future. I would create and dream big. I used my 5 senses and I literally manifested my future. I saw my home. I saw the furniture in it. I smelled the incense burning. I heard my son in his room playing video games. I looked out the window and I saw my daughter getting home from work. And I felt the joy of meeting her at the door and sitting down on the couch with her to hear about her day. I tasted my dinner. This famous beef and Alfredo stupid pasta dish that the kids loved when they were growing up for some reason. I engrossed myself with the emotion of my life as it was going to be, as if it were now. I went into that world as often as possible. When I was in the courtroom, waiting for the court to start, I would lean my head back. During the breaks at treatment, I would lean my head back. If I ever got to sit down at the taco place, I would lean my head back. And then I noticed that even during my waking hours, when I wasn't closing my eyes, my nervous system began to regulate. I began to feel gratitude naturally. I began living in the state of being as if I already had that life. I would spontaneously cry tears of joy throughout the day. And I had very little to feel joy about looking from the outside. This vision carried me through. It gave me the strength I needed. It made the difference for me through any cravings, any doubt, any fear, any stupid fucking text I would get, any hardship. This vision held me at night, comforted me when I had to stand in front of that judge every other week, calmed me. My heart was racing when I would have a using dream, or when I thought that my ex-wife was going to take the kids away forever. Even kept me level-headed at the taco place when the damn kitchen was backed up. Customers yelling at me, my body aching from being on my feet. I remember this girl asking me, she goes, "How do you stay so calm?" I was like, I fucking got over meth. This is nothing. I would literally leave my body during these times. And I would be sitting there with my kids eating that pasta. And if I were to do this all over again, this would be my first step. And it would be the most important recovery effort I would ever undertake. Okay. There you go, guys. Welcome to season 2. What did I miss? What would you add? What would you take away? Feel free to comment. Comment on YouTube or comment on Spotify or anywhere on social media. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think of this. I would love to hear your feedback. All right. Well, let's get the season going, and I'll see you next week.